Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to Guys to Magic. This is Hunter, Steven, David, and Shane. Say what up, boys.
What's going on, everybody?
Hello.
What's up, nerds?
We are back, this time doing part 2 of the Commander Grades video based solely around the multicolored legendary creatures from the newest set, Outlaws of Thunder Junction. That is right, this is part 2. If you haven't seen part 1, check the description for that, as well as the other Commander Grades videos we've done from the set. In case you're new here, what this is basically we go ahead and talk about the new legendary creatures from the set as potential commanders. We give them our own self grades, and then at the end, kind of a consensus grade between all 4 of us. So before we get started, I just want to remind everybody to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, so you're staying up to date with all these videos we got going on. And we'll kick us off with this first legendary creature. It is Jem Lightfoote, Sky Explorer. It's 2, a white and a blue for a 3/3 legendary creature human scout. It's got flying, it's got vigilance, and it says at the beginning of your end step, if you haven't cast a spell from your hand this turn, draw a card. Interesting playstyle. It says don't play spells on your turn, which is basically what Azorius Control wants to do, right, Dave?
Yeah, this is a draw go deck, like literally to a T. I actually really like this card, especially considering like the turn that you cast this, it's not coming from your hand, it's coming from the command zone, so it checks its own clause whenever you get it into play.
Yeah, it is kind of funny that this card has to tell you how to play the classic blue Pasco. Don't play stuff on your turn.
Yeah, be rewarded even more. It seems pretty good.
It just seems kind of boring, though.
Yeah, however, at a certain point, Azorius wants to start playing stuff from your hand to kind of get a board state going. So I feel like you're gonna start casting spells, which means this doesn't do a single thing.
I mean, not only that though, it just kind of seems like when I typically think of commander, you want to think of the commander, and then you build a deck around that commander. This just seems like a good piece, and then you're just playing these colors and doing shenanigans. It doesn't really feel like I'm gonna play my XYZ deck. I'm playing the deck where I draw cards and win the game.
I mean, but you can do that and do stuff. I mean, Foretell is a very strong mechanic, especially in these colors. I feel like there's a lot of support. Plot just came out. Fibbleflip is a good card for that kind of mechanic as well. I think this card's actually got a lot of good support already.
Yep, I agree with Steven. I mean, there's other mechanics too, like you can go around and play like suspend mechanics and stuff like that. Azorius doesn't really do a whole lot of like the exile and play it until end of turn, but I mean, like there are still plenty of ways where you can be doing things on your turn and still meet this clause.
Yeah, it's not necessarily the playstyle I want to play though. I'm definitely not in that camp. I know a couple of you guys are. Shane, you specifically, I'd say you're quite the control mage. But let's go ahead and move on to the grades. I'll kick us off. I think Jem is still going to be middle of the road. I think it's a good support piece in another deck. I don't know if it's good enough at the helm, so I'm going to give it a C.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that this card is decent. It's just kind of boring. I'm going to give it a C.
Hey, it's exactly what I said. Does good stuff, but just boring. C.
And I'll join on the C train.
There we go. Jem Lightfoote, Sky Explorer, starting us with an average of a C. Next up is a familiar face. It's Jolene, Plundering Pugilist. It's 1, a red and a green for a 4/2 legendary creature human mercenary. It says whenever you attack with 1 or more creatures with power 4 or greater, create a treasure token. It also has another ability. You can pay 1 in a red, sacrifice a treasure. Jolene, Plundering Pugilist deals 1 damage to any target. What do you think about Jolene being back, David?
I think she's kind of like the last card we just talked about, where I think she's just a little boring. I do like treasure production, so like that's cool. I don't like the limitations that are imposed on this card, and I'm not really sure if I care about the second portion. Dealing 1 damage is pretty underwhelming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially with having to pay 2. Sorry, Hunter.
No, you're good. I was just thinking like the original Jolene from Capenna, she did a little bit more. Granted, she helped her opponents as well if they were attacking each other. But I don't know. It's cool that it's not what we've seen is activate only a sorcery, is activate only one per turn. So if you did have plenty of treasures and enough mana, you could start just really hitting people instant speed.
Yeah, but just
Like
dude,
I don't like that creature right now that just got cast, dead.
it's not just now that after I said that it was 2, it's basically 3 because you're utilizing treasure as well. That's 3 mana
Yeah.
to do 1 damage. Not the best trade change, is what I'm trying to say.
Meh.
Yeah,
Meh.
artwork's cool. Snake horse thing.
Snake horses are terrifying.
She punched somebody out of their boots, dude. That's sick.
She's pretty strong. But I think we can wrap this one up pretty quickly. Jolene, let's move on to the grades. We'll start with David.
I think I'm actually going to give her a D. Treasure production is cool, but only being able to make 1 is not great.
I was on the same page. I was gonna give her a D as well.
Look at that. I'm also giving her a D.
I'm gonna give her a D too. I don't really enjoy this being like the face commander of a Gruul deck I would want to play. Just it actually makes me upset. I don't know. I don't know why it's making me like I like Gruul and I think it could do really cool things, but there's so many better and cooler commanders than Jolene.
Yeah. Well, the new Jolene unfortunately gets the average grade of a D. Moving on to Kambal, Profiteering Mayor. It's 1, a white, and a black for 2/4 legendary creature human advisor. It says whenever 1 or more tokens enter the battlefield under your opponent's control, for each of them, create a tapped token that's a copy of it. This ability triggers only once each turn. And whenever 1 or more tokens enter the battlefield under your control, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. We will start with Steven.
This card's great.
I
That's
agree
it.
with you. I agree with you completely.
That's it.
I think this
That's it.
card is fantastic. It just sits around and you just gain value just by your opponents casting anything that makes token production. If your opponents had even a Smothering Tithe, you're making a treasure every time they make a treasure, and then when you make that treasure, your opponent loses a life and you gain a life. Just so much value here.
Each
So it
opponent
also
too.
makes like use of like the shitty cheap cards. So like the really crappy cards that when they come into play, your opponents get something, you'll get something for them getting stuff. So it's really interesting.
Oh yeah, like if you use like a generous gift or a stroke to midnight on their stuff, they're making that creature, and then you get to make that creature too.
And then you
And
get to hurt
then
them.
they lose, and you get to hurt them and gain a life.
Well, those are the good ones. I'm talking about the bad ones. Like you play this creature, your opponent gets a creature as well. So
Yeah, for sure.
that's the kind of bad I'm talking about.
I'm just happy we finally have a card that synergizes and is good with like Bitter Blossom.
Yeah.
Bitter. Yeah.
No, this card is fantastic. I mean, at this point, treasure tokens are like incredibly rampant. So you being able to capitalize off of your opponents making those is super powerful. There's tons of just like creature token decks or just decks that make creature tokens in general. And then past that point too, any of your tokens now started to turn into like a draining effect. I mean, normally these kinds of effects that we get in Orzhov require like a blood artist or some kind of like death or sacrifice trigger. This cuts out that whole like aristocrats factor where you're just like you're doing your thing and you're passively draining them, and it's like you cut out step B. You're just A and C. It's just like I'm building my board and I'm killing all of you.
I think it is. We have to mention the fact that like the 1 or more at the bottom half of that text. As long as you have a way to like consistently make 1 and then stop, make 1 then stop. As long as you're not just like I make 500 treasure like at once, they'll still only hit them for once. But I do like you can stagger them out, just start draining the entire board. Hey, and we have found out board wide drains are super mean.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Orzhov gain and drain. Who would have thought?
I mean, I just love how like effective of a counter this is to your opponent's Smothering Tithe.
Yeah.
Oh, I know. It's insane. Yeah. I don't know. I can't say any more of it. It's pretty good. I think we're
I also
all
love the fact that it comes down before Smothering Tithe, unless you're Shane.
You ramp a little bit.
But let's go ahead and move on to the grades. We will start with Steven. Steven, what are you giving Campbell?
A.
Yeah, I think I'm joining you there. Campbell for me as well as an A.
It's gonna be a
I really like this card. However, there are still some hoops that I feel like you need to jump through to really make this thing sing. So I'm gonna give it a B, but it's one of those Bs where it's like I might actually just build this as a deck kind of B.
You should.
These are good.
I think it'd be super mean. Kambal, Profiting Mare, gets the average grade of an A. This next card is a face that we've seen through multiple sets now. It's Kellan, the Kid. It's a green, a white, and a blue for a 3/3 legendary creature, human, fairy, rogue. It's got flying and it's got lifelink. And it says whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, you may cast a permanent spell with equal or lesser mana value from your hand without paying its mana cost. If you don't, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. Shane, we'll start with you. I believe you kind of tinkered around with Kellan the Kid. What do we think?
I'm pretty high on this card. I did tinker around a little bit, not fully finished, but just there's so many different ways to like suspend spells, like we've talked about on previous cards, suspending spells, just casting anything from anywhere other than your hand, top your library. Like there's so many things that can go into this deck, and then you're just playing cards for free. And I think that I've said it a bajillion times that free spells are literally never bad. And if you do happen to miss on the free spell from your hand, you're just dropping a land. Like I don't know. I'm really high on this card. I think it's really cool.
What do you think, Steven?
F.
F.
Yeah, I don't like this card. It could be the best card in the world, but I'm just really upset that Magic had Kellan go through all these sets with all these different colors, and they refused to make a 5-color Kellan.
Oh, you don't know that yet.
They said this was the last time he'd be in the set.
True,
Yeah.
they did say that.
I don't believe that.
Well,
Kellan's
until they
good.
do that, I'm upset.
Well, besides your bias against Kellan himself, what do you think of this as a card?
It's good, man. Free spells are good spells. Comes down cheap.
Perfect.
3/3, flying lifelink. Come on, man. It's a great card.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a great card too. Shane said it best. You can build this deck around different ways to cast spells not from your hand and just get value off of just that. So,
Yeah, imagine if you could add 2 more colors.
You know, I know that you guys have talked this card up. I'm actually not entirely sure that I enjoy this card.
Nope.
I'm not shocked.
I love that. I know that this works well with like some of the suspend, foretell, all those kind of mechanics. This just seems like a Kadama of the East with extra steps, given that this is actually one additional color. And it does come out earlier. It's just like, I mean, how often are you actually going to have that extra thing in your hand to be able to just like cast? I don't know. It's a cool card. It's an interesting effect. I don't hate it.
Definitely 2 more colors in Kadama.
No, Kadama has partner.
Okay. In that case, it could have any colors.
Yeah, well, that's why I said it's like it's one more color than Kadama, because Kadama realistically, like you're not partnering it up with another mono, like green commander. Or if you are, I guess you can, but like don't. I don't know. I just don't see it. I feel like this is one of those commanders. It's like potentially a trap where you build your whole deck around it, and then this thing dies, and then suddenly you're like, oh man, my plot deck just like is a plot deck, and now I'm working with a bunch of like limited chaff.
I think it's pretty good. Let's move on to the grades. Dave, you seem lowest. What are you giving Kellan?
I'm gonna give him a C. I think he's okay.
I think I'm going to give him a B.
I really like Kellan. I'm going all the way to an A.
Wow.
Cool. I'm not. It's a C.
That is salty, dude.
I love this.
Kellan the Kid gets the average grade of a B. Moving on to Kraum, Violent Cacophony. It's 2, a blue and a red for a 2/3 legendary creature, zombie horror. It's got flying. It says whenever you cast your second spell each turn, put a +1/+1 counter on Kraum and draw a card. Mr. Zombie Guy, Steven, what do we think of Kraum?
I don't like this one.
No?
No. I like the other one more, man. The other one's way funner. It's got haste. Yes, it does cost one more. The card draw, I think, is a little bit easier just because your opponent's casting 2 spells each turn. Usually happens a little bit more often.
It's also got
This
partners. You
is
could have partnered it with Kadama.
They could partner it with Kadama. They could have 2 more colors. I mean, is this one good? Sure. Is it Spellslinger? We've seen it before. It does the thing, but it does the thing one time, you know? So I don't know.
Well, it does say each turn. It doesn't limit it to your turn. So you could potentially do this multiple times in a turn cycle, although he's not actually drawing you the cards back for you to continue that. You do have to have like some additional card engine in play.
I mean, I agree with you on that. I don't fully think this card is going to get you 4+1/+1 counters and 4 cards.
Oh, I completely agree with you.
Yeah, I don't think this is a very good at the helm. I think it's very good support. Drawing cards never bad, but being able to cast your second spell each turn just to draw 1 card, you are losing that card advantage.
Hey, it does have flying, so putting counters on a flyer with evasion, maybe get through some commander damage. Just
Yeah.
trying to, I don't know,
You're trying.
trying.
Trying to, I don't know either. Let's go ahead and move on to the grades. What are you giving this, Shane?
I don't even think I was going to give this middle of the road. I think I'm going to go to D.
Yeah, I agree. Kraum for me, also a D.
I'm going to go on the D train.
It's still an evasive beater that draws you cards. I'm going to give it a C.
All right. Well, Kraum, Violent Cacophony gets the average grade of a D. Moving on to a funny guy, it's Laughing Jasper Flint. It's 1 a black and a red for a 4/3 legendary creature, Lizard Rogue. It says creatures you control but don't own are mercenaries in addition to their other types. And it also says at the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top X cards of target opponent's library, where X is the number of outlaws you control. Until end of turn, you may cast spells from among those cards, and mana of any type can be cast to cast those spells. Dave, we got a Rakdos card. What do we think?
I love how you always kick it over to me for the Rakdos cards.
Mhm.
A 3 mana for a 4/3 is a fairly decent rate. It's not bad. I don't really like the randomness factor of this, however. Like, you could potentially whiff on an opponent, or you could end up getting something that's just kind of like okay, I guess. And past that point, like, you still have to pay for it, so it's not really even discounted. Ugh. This could be like a weird mill, I guess, if you have a ton of outlaws, but I don't actually even see that really happening. Then again, actually, you know what? Bitter Blossom makes fairy rogues. There you go. There's your rogue tokens that fit into the outlaws. So I don't know. This is an interesting card. Like, obviously, this wants to play with threat and effects where you steal your opponent's things. But most of those give them back at the end of the turn unless you sack them. So you're not like really building up a board state.
You know, when I was building Gonti in the Thief deck, I was like looking for cards in the main set to go into that deck, and I was like, this would be perfect, except it has red because they built the Gonti deck without red. So made me sad, but I did like this card when I saw it. It's just one of those things that would have fit into that kind of thievery deck. You're stealing your opponent's stuff, and when you steal their stuff, then that becomes a mercenary, which means you get 1 extra thing to go on the next turn. I don't know.
Definitely additive, but like, what exactly would the deck be doing if this wasn't out? Playing the regular like Rakdos, like good stuff with mercenaries, I guess. I feel like if you
I feel
start
like it would-
targeting that guy, you're bummed.
Yeah, I feel like it would probably still be like sacrificed. Although, like, you're probably incentivized to go token route, trying to make a
Yeah.
ton of mercenaries.
It just seems kind of fragile in my opinion.
I will say the fact that it says you may cast the spells from that and not you may play cards really hinders this, because if you hit a land, then you hit nothing.
Wow.
I think the whole
Also,
point is you're trying to hit a lot, not just like one.
True.
I understand that. But also the fact that it's until end of turn you can play those or cast spells from among them, instead of what I like to see is like until the end of your next turn, just to get you a little bit extra mana because if you see something really big that you would like, and if you play this on turn 3 and it's now turn 4, and you hit something, you can't get to play it. It's a bummer. But yeah, let's go ahead and move on to the grades. Dave, Rakdos.
I love this card. I love the artwork. I think it's really cool. I'm going to give it a D.
I don't think I can go that low. So I'm just going to go up 1 spot, and I'm going to give this a C.
Yeah, I think it's fragile, and kind of with Dave, I'm gonna give it a D as well.
I'm gonna give it a D.
Laughing Jasper Flint is laughing sad because he's an average of a D. Moving on to Lazav, Familiar Stranger. 1 a blue and a black for a 1/4 legendary creature shapeshifter. Says whenever you commit a crime, put a +1/+1 counter on Lazav, Familiar Stranger. Then you may exile a card from a graveyard. If a creature card was exiled this way, you may have Lazav become a copy of that card until end of turn. This ability triggers only once each turn. Mr.
Demir
Demir
player.
is
Which one?
Steven.
Oh,
You.
I
So
feel
what
like
do we think
David's the Demir player too, right?
We can
Not as
share.
much as you.
That's true. I do play a lot of Demir. This card's great. It's fantastic. Runs into a good mill route for me. Kind of reminds me a little bit of the ever-changing Dane, which gets me a little hyped too, you know?
Don't
Oh,
you
yeah,
say his name?
Shanghai for sure.
Don't you say his name?
Don't you say his name. No, I really do enjoy this card. I love the flexibility here with, just having to commit a crime, which is very easy in these colors. I think it's fantastic. Kind of like, I think what would be really fun is if your opponent's swinging at you because they think you have a 1/4, you commit a crime, and then you make this thing like a 6/6 that could be in the opponent's graveyard, which I already hear David in my head like, well, that 6/6 has to be in the graveyard. There's a lot of whiff potential here. But, I still think it's fun. I think that there's still some opportunities. Plus, you're putting +1/+1 counters on this every time, so it's going to be bigger, and commander damage is going to be kind of fun. But 3 mana for a 1/4 is solid in my books.
David's sounding very.
Dave, what do you think?
I think this is my favorite artwork in the probably entire set.
Pretty cool.
Cool.
I love this. So just a little bit of heads up here. Lazav being a shapeshifter, all those wanted posters behind him are him, which I think is fucking fantastic. I love this card. I think it's really cool. I think it's super flavorful. It is ultimately still just a 1/4 that is dependent upon your opponent's graveyard, and it does not synergize whatsoever with the Bajuka Bog. And for that reason alone, I can't say I'm high on this.
Love the artwork, not the card, huh? Let's go ahead and move on to the grades, starting with the Demir player, Steven himself. What do we think?
A.
A.
Yeah, I am a massive fan of this card. It plays right into a mill theme, which I love with all my heart. I honestly do really love this card, so I will give this an A.
I'm going middle of the road here. I'm going to give this a C.
I was also feeling middle of the road. See.
I can't.
I know.
I'm going to go with my
All right,
gut.
buddy.
This is a D. We are so all over the place on Lazav.
Well, Lazav, Familiar Stranger, gets the average grade of a C.
You might build this.
Moving on to Lilah, Undefeated Slickshot. It's 1 a blue and a red for a 3/3 legendary creature human rogue. It has prowess. And it says whenever you cast a multicolored instant or sorcery spell from your hand, exile that spell instead of putting it into your graveyard as it resolves. If you do, it becomes plotted. Seems pretty powerful.
Get to cast them
Seems
times. Yeah.
Seems good, man.
How many multicolored spells are we playing?
All
Probably
of
with
them.
this card a lot. I mean,
Okay, but that becoming like a deck restraint. At that point, it's like it starts to ask the question of like, are you playing bad cards to make a good commander good?
yes. I want the good commander
Because
to
if
be
the
good.
commander dies, then you're just playing bad cards.
Yeah, but they're not.
I
I mean,
don't
are
know.
they bad? I don't know. I need to see. At that point, we need to see a list. But I'm sure there's enough multicolored good stuff to like make this card pretty viable.
specifically is it?
Specifically, is it? You're correct.
I was gonna say, I mean, like the number of specifically is it instant or sorcery cards. I know that there are most certainly plenty. However, I do feel like that's a really weird deck constraint. I also feel like that's really gonna stress your mana base. That like I have to constantly have a red and a blue open.
Why is that so?
You make
It's
a good
two
point.
color.
He makes a good point though, because
Nah.
most of the spells in Is It you're gonna want to cast are gonna be monocolored. So if you are casting those monocolored spells, you aren't getting that card back. It's not gonna be plotted, which is okay, but it still has prowess, so it grows at least.
Yeah, but
And
this
if you
is
and if you do have those multicolored spells, that's kind of a bonus, because then you can start chaining.
I don't think this card is good enough if we're just looking at it like the thing that this card does is a bonus. Because prowess is something that we've seen on other legendary creatures in the past.
Yeah, I'm getting sold out of this. The more I'm thinking about it, getting sold out.
Steven, you were the upgrade to the Is It deck. What do we think of that? This Is It card.
Great card.
Is it a great commander?
Mm, I mean, I still think so. I think that with it itself having prowess, I mean, granted, Stella is a win con all in itself. Eris, the other card, the backup commander, made you dragons with prowess, which was really cool. Although it might not be super supportive, I think that, Izzet does have a lot of multicolored spells. Granted, a lot of X spells, so you're kind of like not having that fun there. But to be able to play spells twice and also trigger prowess on the, monocolored spells, I think it's pretty good. I mean, I think that this is pretty viable as a commander. Doesn't have to be super powerful. I think it is pretty decent.
Kind of on David's side still, though.
I'm not.
I've heard that. Yeah.
I think the part that was really I was talking myself out of this card, was it's gonna just turn into a big dumb beater unless you give it evasion. If this had flying, I'd have been like, oh, dude, I'm in.
I know it would be nuts if there were other cards that could give things unblockable or shroud in blue.
Yeah, it's much better when it's stapled on the card.
I'm just not sold on prowess. Like we've seen other prowess commanders before, and I do think that the upside on this card is just like I am incentivized to play suboptimally.
But why does it have to be? I'm sorry, I'm going to go back to Shane. Why does it have to be stapled on the card? The whole point is to cast the spell. So I understand that being stapled on the card would be nice, but if I could cast a spell to give the shroud or flying and then give it a +1/+1 as well, I think it's pretty viable.
I mean,
Plus, if it's a multicolored spell, I can play it again next turn.
Is this better than like Eris?
I mean, I think
No.
Eris is a completely different build.
I think
I think
very
you're building.
I think they're very similar too.
I think they're similar, but Eris cares about you getting your cards in your graveyard, and you kind of want to have these super large monocolored spells rather than having, smaller multicolored spells. Like I think 2 expressive iterations sound really good. I think that there's a bunch of other ones that could be really fun.
Okay, but the card that you just referenced is literally the only card that came to mind whenever I was thinking about this deck.
Sure, and I'm sure if we did a little bit more of a deep dive and wanted to talk more about this card for 5 minutes, I'm sure we could find banger cards.
Well, we won't be doing that. Instead, let's move straight to the grades. Steven, you seem the highest on this. What are we giving it?
I mean, I'm still going to give it a C. I mean, I don't think it's a super powerful commander, but I still think it's a good commander.
I'm going to join you there. I also think it's just middle of the road. I'm not high on it. I'm not super low on it, so C.
I'm a little lower. I think I'm gonna go to a D.
I don't normally do this, but I did jump over to EDH Rec for this card. There are 2 cards on the Izzet Spellslinger deck that work in this deck. I'm probably gonna give this just a D.
The average grade for Lilah Undefeated Slickshot is a C. Moving on to the only legendary creature from the vault. That's right. We have Loot, the key to everything. It is green, blue, red for a 1/2 legendary creature, Beast Noble. It's got Ward 1, and it says at the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top X cards of your library, where X is the number of card types among other non-land permanents you control. You may play those cards this turn. Shane, you also tinkered around with loot. What do we think about it?
I think he's a really cool brew. I think that just playing him is just going to passively give you a good amount of card advantage. Granted, you need other, so it's going to count not as a creature because it's, other. But even if you have like 2, 3 things out, maybe just even 2, you're just getting those for free for doing nothing. Casting this in the field, like I think it's good. Like I don't know if it's going to be like game breaking or anything, but I think it's really good.
Shane, you want to know a good card that goes in this?
Tell me a good card.
Baldorn.
You're not wrong.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic card to go into loot, the key to everything. Yeah. With the name like loot, you are pseudo looting. You're looking at some cards, and if you don't play them, they are gone. So yeah, I think the key to everything really shows you everything in your deck. What do you think, David?
I think this card is really boring. Like, I understand that it's got a decent amount of power here, but it's just like this effect is just like it doesn't point you in a direction. It doesn't incentivize you to play anything in specific. This is just like this is 3 colors. Go play the absolute best things in those colors because you're just gonna get passive value out of this card. The only thing that I can say is that Ward 1 I don't actually think is an ability. That's an annoyance, not a protection. But past that point, I mean, like, this is fantastic card advantage. I don't know. I just wish that there was maybe a little bit more here.
Yeah, I mean, it does do the thing that every deck wants to do, and that's just draw into your win. And this is doing that at an alarming rate if it sticks on the field. Especially if you just have just anything else, just any non-land permanent on you're just looking at that many every upkeep. It's pretty insane.
The way you're talking, David, it's kind of the way I was talking about the first card we talked about. But you like that first card, so it's like it's doing it's quote unquote vanilla, but it's just gonna enable you to do strong things in the decks. Like at least this card, you're kind of building around it a little bit. Like not okay, granted, you don't have to go super into it, but the build that I was tinkering with, I did put a lot of different types in, like put battles in, I put planes, like just to kind of maximize that. But I mean, like I said originally, just 2 or 3 could be doing the thing. But good, dude.
And like that could just be where my brain goes on this because I wouldn't. I would not choose to jump through those hoops. I literally would just be playing the absolute best cards of these 3 colors. And I find it boring. Like, I'm not saying that it's not a good card. I'm just looking at this like this very much so feels like this card was designed to sell a product.
It's the baby Yoda of Magic the Gathering. We've said
Yeah,
it over.
and like it's the only legendary creature they got from the vault thing too. So like this was, I guess, originally supposed to have been like an add-on, like what we got with the aftermath set from Archer Machine. This seems like it was supposed to be that chase card that was like the thing that you were supposed to go pick up from all the commander players out there to like drive up the prices and sales of that set. Because like the card is good. It's just it's so open-ended that like I really do actually wish that this did say that like you could cast an instant or sorcery or like a non-land permanent or something that like even in the most minimal way it gave you a direction to play. Steven, we haven't heard from you. Steven, you jump over here.
This card sucks.
We haven't heard from him.
Well, that's why we haven't heard from him.
I mean, I agree. I just think this card was designed to get people hype, and I just don't really see the hype. I mean, you're literally broadcasting your win to your opponent. So sure, yeah, you can look at whatever cards you want to, and then just get it countered. I understand what this card wants to do. I understand that there's tons of card advantage, and normally I'm a big fan of it, but I'm a big fan when my opponents don't know exactly what I'm planning to do. And I think that's kind of the issue I have with this card.
Let's go ahead and move on to the grades. I'll kick us off with loot. As much as we don't like it, I can't deny that it's powerful, so I'm going to give it a B.
I'm not even gonna say that I don't like it. I really like it. I'm giving it a B.
I hate this card. I think this is a terrible design. It's a B.
All right, well, I'll be the one to give it a C, sure.
Loot, the key to everything, gets the average grade of a B. Moving on to Malcolm, the eyes. It's blue and red for a 2/2 legendary creature, Siren Pirate. It's got flying, it's got haste, and says whenever you cast your second spell each turn, investigate.
Cool.
That's boring.
Yeah, Dave, you have to admit this one's kind of boring.
Okay, this is a potential spell slinger deck that cares about artifacts in here, and it also has a flyer with haste that is relatively cheap, and I don't think it's going to draw a whole lot of hate. Do I think that this card is boring? No. Do I think this card is powerful? No.
Card's
Also,
boring, dude.
no. Steven, what do you think about this Is It card?
Is it good?
No.
No.
Is it boring? Yes.
Yes.
Is it time for
Is it?
grades?
Yes.
Yes.
I haven't even talked about it yet. I don't have anything to say. You guys already said it all. But let's move on to the grades. Malcolm the Eyes for me, getting a D.
I'm gonna give it an F.
Well, I mean, it does something. It's boring, but it does something, so it's gonna get.
That's something boring.
There are a lot of red decks out there that care about artifacts, and there's a lot of ways to capitalize on that. So because you consistently make artifacts in this deck, for just being rewarded for doing Is It things, I'm actually not as low on this card. I'm going to give it a C.
The average grade for Malcolm the Eyes is a D. And the final card we are talking about today is Marchesa, Dealer of Death. It is blue, black, red for a 3/4 legendary creature human rogue. It says whenever you commit a crime, you may pay 1. If you do, look at the top 2 cards of your library. Put one of them into your hand and the other into your graveyard. That's some pretty good value, wouldn't you say, Dave?
It's cool. I mean, she's cheap, she's effective. My only problem here is like, what is the hate on this card? Because like, in order for her to work, you have to be interacting with your opponents. You have to be killing their things. Or you have to be like, I don't know, making them discard things. I guess any kind of targeting, but generally speaking, in a game of Commander, like targeting means probably destroying. So
Not necessarily. You're in blue here. You can start bouncing stuff. That's targeting.
Still
okay,
annoying.
that's still annoying though. Like I do think that Marchesa is probably going to be a hate generator. And she is also kind of taxing you in that you do have to pay an additional 1 for you to be able to get that effect. At the same time, fueling your graveyard in Grixis is really powerful. And card draw is really powerful. So, like, there's a significant amount of upside here. I am very worried about the amount of hate.
I mean, sure, there's going to be hate, but everybody's going to get hated eventually. You're trying to win the game.
And you're trying to deal some death out, dude, with this card. I don't know.
Funny. I like it a lot.
I like it. It just, I can acknowledge that the ability is strong. It just seems like it's an incomplete card to me. I'm looking at it going like, well, where's the other part that she does? Like, you have Death Touch? No, she doesn't. Does she have something like, where is it?
No,
I
I
just
feel
like
like
things stapled on cards.
he wants all the things on the card.
I want to build around my commander.
You can. Build a crime deck.
Would it make you feel any better if this card had Ward 1?
It would. It would. It truly would.
All right, that's flavor text. I think it's all in your head at this point.
Yeah, seriously. I think this card's fantastic. Comes down super early. It's got great stats being a 3/4. Do I think paying the 1 and taxing yourself is a little unfortunate? Yes. Because essentially it's almost like it's a reverse heuristic study to a certain degree. It's like, I'm going to target you with something, but do I pay the 1?
Nobody likes paying
100%.
taxes, dude.
I mean, I got to pay my own taxes. I mean, we're in Grixis, like David said. We're trying to fill our graveyard with stuff. We're trying to get some extra card draw. I think it's fantastic. And I honestly do love this card, and I don't really see a lot of negative.
Yeah, if you just had something on the field that just pings for just 1, that's a crime. So if you just ping somebody, like, we're doing 1 damage to that creature. It's not even killing that creature, but it's just pinging it just to get the added benefit of looking at the top 2 cards every time that happens. That's pretty good.
I can't remember the name of the creature. I think it's a colorless spell that you can pay X and Phyrexian to remove counters from something. And literally it's free crime. I mean, granted, you're paying 2 life, but life is a resource in Commander for sure. And I think in a Grixis kind of like maybe like a turbo-ish deck, You know, this card's got a special place in my heart for sure. So
Ooh.
Like the Taxon probe, dude.
I was gonna say Grixis has a very good amount of like cards that you could really start losing life to if you want to play that route, and I don't think it cares about Marchesa.
well, I don't think I'm not saying I want to play cards that make me lose life. I'm just saying that there's creatures that can let you do crimes essentially for free each single turn. So instead of having to pay a bunch of mana or 2 mana or 3 mana and then have to pay one more on top, you can pay 2 life and then just pay 1.
I do get that, but like paying 2 life and 1 mana to draw and like I guess essentially pitch a card to the graveyard. At what point do you look at this and be like, wow, my commander is just like doing something that is just worse than a Necropotence?
I mean, I get where you're going. I think that that's just one way to go, and I think you even throw fucking Necropotence in this.
Where are we going?
We're going to lose the game because our life total is plummeting quickly in this conversation.
I think the fact that it doesn't have that dumb sentence stapled to only deal it once per turn on it makes this card even better, because commit as many crimes as you want per turn. Look at how many cards you can pay for. I like that. Let's go ahead and move on to the grades. I'm actually pretty high on Marchesa. I'm actually going to give it a B.
I'm right there with you. I'm going to give this a B as well.
I think I would have preferred the once per turn rather than the pay 1 mana. I'm going to give her a C.
I'm also gonna give her.
Well, Marchesa, Dealer of Death, gets the average grade of a B. And that is going to do it for us today. If you guys like this video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, because if you're watching this before part 3 comes out, you might want to stick around and enjoy part 3 when it comes out. So subscribe. Comment down below. Did you guys agree with our grades? Maybe you disagreed completely. Maybe we missed a point about one of these commanders that you guys know. Comment down below. Always interested to hear you guys' opinions. In the description, you will find links to all of our social media accounts. That's TikTok, that's Twitter, that's Instagram. @Guys Match for each one. Follow us on those as well to stay up to date with everything else that we got going on the screen right now. That is right. Those are all of our Patreon subscribers. Thank you guys so much for your added support. It means the world to us. If you guys haven't already seen what they're seeing over on our Patreon, check the description as well for that link and consider subscribing. And until the next video, hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Peace.
Later.
Goodbye.
Bye bye.